Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you are. Scott Luton, Greg White here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Gregory, how we doing?
We're doing well, Scott. How are we? How are you doing? How are they doing?
I think it's been a heck of a week. It's a challenging set of circumstances right now from a variety of levels, but we've had a lot of very informative conversations, and we're gonna have a lot more of that over the next hour, huh?
No doubt. It's always good to figure out, since we're constantly given disruption, it's always interesting to talk to folks and figure out how they're handling it.
Absolutely.
Didn't we determine in 2020 and 2021 that disruption is the new normal?
We certainly absolutely did. In fact, I think we banned certain words because it was so much of the new normal. But
I
today,
think new
Greg,
normal was one of them. We either did or should have banned, isn't it? Sorry
that's
about
right.
that.
Well, speaking of today's show, though, Greg, see what I did there? Speaking of today's show, we're going to be talking about creatively finding new ways of improving and enhancing cash flow while also implementing increased levels of what we like to call anti-fragility into your organization. Greg, the other word for that, right?
Yeah, that's the word we're not supposed to say, resiliency, or that's been said many times at the very least, right?
That is right. But to get us through it, we've got an excellent what I'll call a Hall of Fame panel assembled with leaders from Esker, LSQ, and Texas Christian University, TCU. So stay tuned for what promises to be an informative and intriguing conversation. Greg, before we bring on that panel, why don't we say hello to a few folks? How's that sound?
That sounds good, Scott. Let me see. Who do we have out there?
We have, of course, Dr. Rhonda
Of course.
Bumpinza Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Making it happen. Now, last time you were with me, Greg, and Rhonda was here, you mentioned you could just picture her on a mountaintop there in Arizona, tuning in to Supply Chain Conversations, right?
Yep. And look at that profile pic. Maybe that's why, right?
Gorgeous. So, Dr. Rhonda, thank you for joining us. Jonathan, great to have you here. And good morning to you as well via LinkedIn, wherever you are. Let us know where you're tuned in from. Of course, we know Dr. Rhonda is a regular dear friend of the show. We know she's in the Phoenix area. Does a lot of great stuff from a wellness standpoint. But Jonathan, tell us where you're tuned in from. Stephen Bush, what's for lunch? Greg, really quick, what was for lunch?
In logistics at Heidelberg. That's a good question because I haven't decided what's for lunch yet. I really just may have had brunch. I'm not thinking about lunch yet. Believe it or not, Scott, I'm not thinking about food right now.
We went around the horn. We went around the horn pre-show with our panel here. One hails from Fort Worth, one's in the Denver area, and one is in San Francisco. And that conversation talking about local cuisine made us really hungry. So, Stephen, we're not sure yet, but let us know where you're tuned in from, and we'll make sure we'll all be hungry together over the next hour. Michael Lowe tuned in from Austin. We were talking about Austin. Michael, great to see you via LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us.
Got somebody from the DFW Metroplex. So,
really?
Yeah, we're going to be covering Texas. Yeah, that's where the unnamed TCU guest is going to be.
That is right.
Dallas,
that is right. Stephen, we may have a little technical snag. I know our live stream platform,
especially on LinkedIn, they love to be very, very efficient with bandwidth.
Right.
That's a nice way to say it, wasn't it?
It was a very nice. I applaud your diplomacy here today. Goodness knows we need a lot more of that across the world here lately. Stephen, we'll see if that gets fixed, and of course, we'll be releasing the replay in just a week or so. Hey, Bill Stankiewicz is tuned in from Savannah. Another great podcast team, he says, Greg.
Live.
Right here. Jonathan answered the call. Lafayette, Louisiana?
That's right.
Yeah.
Though it's Lafayette, isn't it? Lafayette around Atlanta? It's Lafayette in Louisiana.
I'm going to trust you. But I saw a story on a town in Mississippi. I think it's spelled the same way, but they call it Lafitte. Lafitte. How about that? Yeah. Memory is tuned in. Memory. Hey, great to see you back. One of our favorites around here. We look forward to all the t-shirt isms. That
I'm glad
intro,
she likes our intro. Yeah.
that intro memory says before the session starts is out of Hollywood good. How about that? I love it. Josh Goody is tuned back in. Of course, he is in oddly sunny Seattle.
That's better than last report, Josh.
It sure is.
It was rainy again, I think, or something like to that effect.
Yeah, Josh. Hey, great to have you back. Give us the more quantified weather report when you get a second. Hey, dear friend Mark Preston. He's on the board with the Association of Manufacturing Excellence. Longtime friend. Mark, great to see you. Tuned in from Peachtree City here in Georgia. Bill says he's tuning in from Savannah Technical College with 25 students from the military. Hey, Bill, love you. Big shout out to all of your class and love what you do. How cool is that, Greg?
Yeah, that's cool. Thank them for their service.
Absolutely. Jyothi, if I think I've got that right. If I didn't, let us know. Jyothi is tuned in from Mumbai via LinkedIn. Gene Pledger, of course, from North Alabama, is back with us. Gene, great to see you. Stephen is tuned in from Kennesaw right here from Jimmy John's. Man, Stephen.
Jimmy
you're killing me, man.
That's a very precise location, Steve.
Love that, Stephen.
It's BLY.
Right. Nazifo.
BLY.
Nazifo is tuned in from South Africa, and she looks like she's involved in maritime operations across the supply chain management world. Wonderful. We look forward to hearing your perspective. Mamet is tuned in. Tim Ingram is back with us. Tunde from Nigeria is tuned in. Welcome, everybody. Great to have everyone. We look forward to your perspective as we work through the conversation here today. As Tim says, Greg, let's Tim it up. So on that note, Greg, are you ready for me to introduce and bring in our esteemed panel? You ready to go?
I am. Let's go.
Well, let's do it. So we got a three-person panel here today. I want to welcome in Vikas Shah, Chief Revenue Officer with LSQ. We have Dr. Morgan Swink, who is the Eunice and James L. West Chaired Professor of Supply Chain Management at the Neely School of Business at prestigious Texas Christian University. And then we've got our dear friend, of course, the gentleman that moves at the speed of 1,000 gazelles, Dan Reeve, who is head of sales with Esker. Let's welcome it all in. All right. Good afternoon, Vikas, Morgan, Dan. How are we doing today?
Well, good.
Great.
Good.
Fantastic.
Great to have you back.
Welcome aboard.
Greg, you remember all of these, we're very fortunate. All of these panelists are repeat guests. Dan always knocks it out of the park. Vikas was with us, I think, just a couple months back on a live stream. Hollywood was calling him after the job he did here. And then, of course, Morgan joined us for a webinar a few months back. And I think we had to go through his agent to get him rebooked. So it's great to have all three of y'all here today. And Greg, you asked, so I know we're going to talk about lunch here in just a second, but Steven says BLY is a BLT.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
All right.
That sounds like a great lunch.
It does.
Now I am hungry.
Well, speaking of, Greg, I think that's where we're going to start our conversation today, right?
Yeah, well, let's figure out what everyone likes. We actually got to warm this up a little before we got on the air, but so today is national, or is it today or tomorrow? National Pack Your Lunch Day. So what I'd like to do is let's start with some really serious and important questions. What do you or have you in your history packed as your lunch as a favorite? So Dan, with the speed of 1,000 gazelles, could you share with us? You can tell Scott and I have really locked into that when you said that, right? But,
I think before I was shipped off to boarding school at age of 13 in England, I think, and when I was walking to school and having lunch as a kid, I think it was a wagon wheel. It was a chocolate in a sort of a round wheel of chocolate and marshmallow. That was, if I could get one of them, I was happy. Nowadays, I've got two young girls, 5 and 8, and when they go to school, you know what? I kind of like it in the evening. When the packed lunch comes home, there's bits they haven't eaten, and my wife's not looking. I'll have some of the leftovers. They're tasty.
Love it.
Every
Greg.
father should garbage dispose. I think that's beautiful. You know what I think a wagon wheel reminds me of, Scott?
A moon pie.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's possibly the English version of a moon pie. Have you ever had a moon pie, Dan?
I have. Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah. Vikas, tell us what's your favorite packed lunch?
Well, my mom packed lunch for me all the time, and my favorite part was essentially just white bread with jelly. And she wouldn't tell me what jelly she's going to use. She had all these different flavors, and she would surprise me. So some days I would have a fantastic time, and some day I would go just completely starving.
I was going to ask you, did she ever surprise you with a jelly you didn't like? So obviously she did. So what is one you don't like?
Well, it would be all kinds of flavors. Strawberries were my favorite. Strawberries, raspberries, blueberries. But once in a while she would throw in a eclectic, exotic flavor in there, and it would just
flop, huh?
It was just completely flop. But
yeah,
but that was
it's funny because when I was a kid, I never wanted peach jelly, but now peach preserves, similar. I really, really like it, but there was a time when I just would not eat peach. So I moved to the South, and Scott made me start eating.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. So Morgan, tell us about what is it that you pack? You might pack your lunch still, because technically you're still in school.
I still am. I can't get out of school. I don't know why, but no, my mom wanted to vary my lunch, but I would not allow it. I had to have the same thing every single day from age 6 to at least 11. I had a bologna sandwich every single day, and I loved it. And I became so full of bologna. I guess that's why I'm a professor now.
Oh, nice. Nice. Man, you're going to fit right in.
I hate bologna now, but I loved it back then.
Gosh, I can't imagine requesting bologna.
I know. It's crazy.
You know what? You did your family a tremendous service by eating that and probably saving on your riches. Yeah.
Probably took years off my life.
So with mayonnaise? Is that right?
No, actually it just bread, bologna, and mustard. And I have a very precise way of eating it. Squish it all down and then fold it all up, and who knows what that psychologically, I don't know what that means, but yeah, it was very rigid process that I could not vary.
Wow.
Man. Process driven. So one quick follow-up question I've got to ask you, because one of my father-in-law's favorite things in the world is a fried bologna sandwich at Robert's Western Wear
in Nashville.
Yes. So fried bologna, Morgan, is that?
Well, my mom would fry it in a skillet, and then we'd eat it with eggs for breakfast. But I've never had a fried bologna sandwich.
Okay, we'll fix that. We're going to fix
that. It's not dissimilar to the bologna sandwich you've had, but somehow, Morgan, it tastes better fried, and Robert's is the best in the world.
Yeah. I'll check it out next time. It's in Nashville, you said.
Yeah, Nashville.
Yes. All right. So I'd love to, especially on the pre-show, Greg, as we mentioned earlier, we went around the horn with Dan and Morgan and Vikas and talked about where they live and some of the cuisines and restaurants. So we'll have to have, there's so many stories there. We'll have to have y'all back for a full hour, maybe a food discussion, but there's so much going on right now. So I want to shift gears to the wide world of global business and global supply chain. In particular, we want to start, Greg and I and the team, and yes, Mark, see if I can share his quick comment. No, Amanda is not eating in front of me with a cold beer. We save that for the weekends most of the time. So great question. But leaving the food discussion behind, we want to talk about level setting on what we're seeing out across industry. So especially related to, and I'm going to start with Dan here, especially related to these increasing prices, right? So many, almost across the board. And of course, supply chain constraints, old and new. So let's start with what some of the things you are seeing out in the market. Dan, let's start with you.
Sure. I think, and especially in the last 2 weeks, of course, risk was something a lot of companies were focusing on. You talked about in the pre-show notes, the anti-fragility, and PwC was saying, hey, organizations need to shift to have cash available and move from just in time to just in case. Well, our just in case turned up out in Ukraine, didn't it? So I think the reality is what we're seeing is companies are saying, let us know about risk. Our suppliers that we work with, are they now risky? And we didn't know that before. Our customers that we work with, are they now risky? Because often you bring on customers and suppliers and you check them out once a year, or well, now I think a lot of finance leaders are saying we need to know about this sooner, proactively. The other thing I think that's going on specifically right now is, yes, many finance leaders will turn to ESCA as a way of paying suppliers quicker, faster, enabling early payment discounts, supply chain financing. That's something Vikas and I team up with. And also they'll turn to ESCA as a way of invoicing customers, get paid quicker, capture and apply that cash, and improve working capital. Finally, I see that a lot of folks are really paying attention in terms of their working capital. What money have we got that we do? Can we chase that up? Can we get it in quicker? Who do we need to pay? We don't want to lose our place. And I think in line, I think Morgan
Right.
and Vikas will probably talk about that. But there's something, my final point is something going on that's really been exacerbated in the last week or two. That is disputes. So the supplier might not be able to supply you the goods at $100,000 anymore. Now it might be costing them $120,000. When they send in the invoice may have gone up, and it bounces. When you do a three-way match, it doesn't match with what you were expecting. So now I think there's even more effort, because suddenly, hey, the suppliers might not just be able to absorb those increases due to raw material costs, gas costs, et cetera, et cetera. So there's even more work to be done in finance, where guess what? Your receivables, your payables, your collections team are already stressed, retiring early or leaving, and juggling too many applications. So there's even more work to be done, and there's stress between customers and suppliers.
Yep. So before I move on to Morgan, Greg, it's really important, perhaps more than ever before, to be a good customer and a good supply chain partner these days, right?
I thought about that as Dan was talking about it early in the pandemic, right? When everything shut down and everyone was in crisis and everyone kind of needed a leg up. I cannot remember who it was, Scott, but it was a poignant statement. Now it's too late to make friends. And right now is not the time to make enemies or to strain your partnerships with your trading partners, for sure.
Excellent point. And what we're going to do, the research team, we're going to dive in and figure out who had that moment of brilliance.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to move along to Morgan with TCU. Morgan, what are some of the things, as we level set here, some things you're seeing out in the market?
Yeah. So I'm looking more at the macro financial statistics and changes over time across different industries, and I'd echo what Dan said. A lot more cash out there. Companies are sitting on 2 to 3 times the kind of average level of cash that they had in the last 10 years. So everybody's beefing up. I think because, and to Dan's point, all that uncertainty out there, all the disruption that we've gone through and all the uncertainty going forward. So they're seeing that as their kind of number one hedge against that future risk. The other thing that's bumped up, which is kind of going against maybe what Greg just said, is a lot of that cash is getting financed through payables. So over the last 20 years, we've seen just a steady increase in that kind of average amount of payables. Everybody's lengthening their terms. And that's bumped since 2019, that's bumped up another 10, 15% on average. Not all companies are doing that. And I think this gets to the point that Greg made. There's a big distinction between those companies that are able to and see the value of treating their suppliers well and trying to help them through the situation. And then the other companies that are really using them as the source of cash and a source of capital, in tough times, either because they have to or because they don't value the longer term relational, benefits that come from it. Yeah.
Well said. And I love that last point where you ended, because they don't tie nearly as much value to the big picture. And oftentimes that can be completely at odds when it comes to alignment of the relationship upstream and downstream of the supply chain. So Greg, really quick, your response to Morgan's take there.
Well, there's a third category to what Morgan is talking about, and we've talked about it some, where some of the big shippers, retailers, brands, whatever, are taking advantage of their vendors and charging them to be paid on time, using unique payment schemes where they actually finance the debt that they are owed and intend to pay late to their suppliers. So not all is, what do we want to say? Sunshine and daffodils, right? There are people being opportunistic in this market.
Yeah, and we can get into this later if you want, but we're actually doing some research on this now that shows that those companies that do that tend to see a lot more supplier turnover,
Right.
a lot more churn in their supply base, as well as some other transactional costs and things like that that come from that.
Not to be too simplistic about it, but if you don't do the right thing, you're going to pay in some way, shape, or form. So it's good to hear, Morgan. We'll probably dive into that in a minute. Vikas, I'm coming to you next, but really quick. Memory makes a great point. An informed customer makes informed decisions. We need to communicate in drafts such cost changes to all for changes.
Allow for change.
Allow. Yeah, thank you. That little space there.
Yeah,
allow
right.
for changes. Excellent point. And I love that first part. An informed customer makes informed decisions. Love that. And Gene says, pay early and you both win, which is kind of what Dan was speaking to earlier.
Right.
Okay. So Vikas, let's talk about level setting. So what are some of the things you're tracking out there in the current market?
Yeah, it's an interesting time. We've been talking to a lot of procurement and supply chain leaders lately, and the biggest priority for a lot of these professionals is securing supplies. It is an absolute critical priority for most stakeholders. All the other messaging around automation, digitization, transformation is essentially going over their head. What they're really concerned about or lose sleep over is securing supplies. And what I've talked about, and both Greg, you and Morgan and Dan have alluded to this, is how do you treat your suppliers as partners? During this time, it's extremely important. Give them access to an early pay program.
Mm-hmm.
All of these suppliers are looking to keep their businesses afloat, and do that without asking them for terms. And they will remember this forever. They will remember that you stood by them during these tough times, and they will pay you back with terms, once the businesses, calibrate. So it's really important for professionals to understand that if you can be by your suppliers as partners and they see that during these times, it's going to be very rewarding in the long term.
I love that. Greg, I want to come to you for a quick comment next, but one of the things that brings to my mind is it's a lot easier, or at least it's easier to take care of a current supplier that's delivering than try to go out there and find and onboard a new supplier, especially during the pandemic, as we've all learned. But Greg, your take on what Vikas said there.
Yeah, it makes me think there is a distinct difference between getting paid back and payback. And depending on how you treat your suppliers and your trading partners, payback could be coming your way after a crisis.
Yeah. I love that, Greg.
If you've seen the movie, you don't want payback.
If you know, you know. So Mel Gibson and payback. It's funny. Internally, when we talk about any kind of collections, that movie always comes to my mind. So y'all check it out. Mel Gibson, Payback. It's probably from the late 90s. I don't know. Okay. So payback is different than getting paid back. I love that, Greg. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about what actions that leaders and organizations are taking. And we're going to go in reverse order here. So Vikas, that means we're going to stick with you. So what are you seeing leaders do about some of these conditions?
I think pay it forward is the general theme. So, shifting from, you don't want to be in the payback situation, you want to be in the pay it forward situation, with your suppliers. And, that's a great investment to make, whether it's a long-term strategic supplier relationship, whether it's a new supplier relationship, especially if it's a diversity, minority, or women-owned business, you want to pay it forward. And leaders are thinking about innovative ways in which they can do that without taking on too much overhead and burden, because we all know that AP departments and procurement departments are completely stretched right now. Not just with mid-sized organizations, but even though with large organizations, and they do not want to take on additional complexity to process payments. But there are lots of creative solutions out there. There's an easier way to do that and get it up and running so that suppliers can get along with providing you the critical supplies that you need to secure in your business. And just make sure that that relationship is intact, because you just don't want to make sure that you have a spot in the line. You want to make sure that you are in the line, and it's important that you keep paying it forward across your supply chain to secure that. So
Vikas, one of the things I heard there, and Greg, maybe you too, is you want to make it easy. If you can eliminate
Mhm.
complexity for your suppliers, especially needless complexity, which is non-value added and complete muda, why not do that, right, Vikas?
Absolutely. And when people think about AP systems or procurement systems, immediately the red flags go in their mind. So when we jump on these calls, we try and make it very simple. We want to talk about on-demand solutions where they can simply either provide cash advances or early payment programs to their suppliers. And ideally speaking, you want to do it for all your suppliers across the entire supply chain, but it might not be feasible just given the scope and scale of some of these suppliers with
Right.
some of these customers. You can start small. You can start with one supplier. You can start with 10 suppliers. Think about who really needs the liquidity. Who is a strategic supplier? Which critical supplies do you want to secure as part of your business so your production doesn't go down, so on and so forth. And you can approach it in a phased manner and make it really simple for AP and procurement departments to implement something like this.
So, Greg, really quick, we saw on the beginning, if you remember when we talked about the aviation industry in particular, an example comes to my mind on the front end of the pandemic, where they have all these component manufacturers that in a very extended global supply chain. They were right away they were acting to pay their suppliers up front to keep those
Right.
operations afloat. You remember me and you talking about that. But Greg, your comment before we move on to Morgan.
Semiconductors. Think about how the American automakers treated the semiconductor manufacturers. They said, sure, go ahead and produce those semiconductors. We'll let you know if we're going to cut a PO for them. Right. And of course, the semiconductor manufacturers were smart and didn't without a commitment because times were very turbulent then. But look at, speaking of payback, as Vikas was talking about, look at the payback that they got. Almost an entirely lost year of production because they didn't do the right thing by their suppliers, and now people are more likely to buy a used car than a new car. Some suppliers some automakers had to skip an entire model year. So the impact, when you talk about big picture, that is a big picture impact.
Agreed.
And look, it's a pay me now or pay me later kind of thing. If you take advantage of your vendors, don't think they don't figure it out. That's why you got a 3% price increase. If you always use your credit card and it costs them 3%, or you always drag them or you put them on a finance plan and it costs them money, they will get payback.
So speaking of payback, maybe that's the theme of our discussion here today, but Vikas mentioned the movie Pay It Forward, which is another great one. It's a great feel-good movie. So that's a great call out.
Well, and that's a much better approach to this strategy.
Right.
Obviously.
And much more positive, uplifting movie as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So Morgan, let's circle back to you. So what are you seeing leaders and organizations do about some of these challenges?
Yeah, so many different things. I think a lot of them are finally getting serious about risk management. And I guess I'll kind of categorize the responses that I'm seeing in two different ways. There's a framework now in the academic world that's kind of growing in this area of, I know you don't like the word resilience. We're not supposed to use that word. Anti-fragility.
No, it's okay. We like it.
Yeah.
We just don't want to barrage people with it more.
Yeah, but it's basically it's buffering or bridging, right? And it's not or, it's and, right? Buffering and bridging. So we mentioned the cash and inventory as hedges against disruptions in demand or supply. I mean, that's going on, and that's kind of the old school way of dealing with risk. But the bridging strategies is what we're seeing a lot more of now, at least by the leaders. And that is, they're getting serious about mapping out their supply bases. They're looking at 2, 3, 4, sometimes 4 tiers down if they can. They're not looking at all the suppliers. To Vikas's point, we're trying to identify which ones are critical, which ones are the bottlenecks, which ones are most susceptible to disruption, whether that be geographically oriented kinds of disruption or economically oriented or politically oriented, whatever the disruption sources might be. And then I think, some of these folks are rethinking some of their sourcing strategies. We've kind of followed a paradigm for a long time, especially in certain manufacturing industries that have emphasized, volume leverage with a few key sources or maybe even single source. There's an argument to be made now for a risk hedging strategy that at least allows, if you're not sourcing directly from multiple suppliers, at least identifying those ones that you can quickly go to if one of your key suppliers goes down. So that kind of thinking, agility and all internal as well as external, investing in training or technology or whatever we can do to be more shiftable, more scalable in terms of our internal operations. So all that kind of thing. And I think a lot of technology enablement, which was already happening, has kind of been accelerated by COVID in those directions. So all of that is in the overall mix of things that could be done to try to address the situation. Some of them are long-term, unfortunately. They take a long time to implement.
Right. Greg, your quick comment on what Morgan shared there.
Yeah, as we talk about this, I think it's important to identify that a lot of the bottlenecks, a lot of the fragilities that we're talking about exist in the manufacturing supply chain, who can take a great example from the finished goods, retail, and distribution supply chain, because secondary sourcing or alternate sourcing or other techniques that have been used in finished goods for decades, literally half a century, would be incredibly valuable for manufacturers. And frankly, I never cease to be stunned. Scott, talk about words that people get tired of. I never cease to be stunned by the fact that manufacturers are so far behind in this regard and have to be told by Morgan and others, right, that, hey, maybe you ought to consider a secondary source, or maybe you ought to give 70% of the volume to this vendor and 30% to this vendor, so they're standing by and ready when you need them, because that is common knowledge in finished goods supply chains.
Well, that and invest in your people. Goodness gracious, this is 2022. This is not a new concept. Invest in your people, and they're going to not only help take care of you, but they're going to be more apt and more able to do different things, so that as you have to be nimble through these times, you've got the talent because you've invested in it. So, but Morgan and Greg, a lot of good stuff there. Vikas, you made a great point, and I'm going to circle back to in just a minute some of the things you're seeing out there. Dan, I'm coming to you next, but before I do, Cindy Palmer, you're right, and great to see you. I love what you do for our veteran industry via vets2industry.org to hook you up with Bill. Backup plans are important. Backup to the backup plans are important. Excellent point there. Memory says lead times on deliveries will impact invoicing, especially when working on leaner inventory and especially for slow movers. Excellent point. Michelle's got a great question we'll try to circle back on in just a second. But Dan, I know you're chomping at the bit. We've covered a lot of ground since we circled back to you. Well, how are leaders and organizations, taking the football in their hands and running with it here?
I feel you've thrown me 3 or 4 balls, and I've never been able to juggle, but I'm going to try. Okay, so Greg.
It's okay to set one down and pick one up at a time. Yeah.
It's a bit like the Rubik's Cube. I am the kid that used to cheat, and I could never get it to work. So
move the stickers around.
Move the stickers, and then try and get them back on. What I am seeing is 2 things. So first is you talk about sort of diversification, adding suppliers. Many of the finance and payable projects that folks are working with us on are increasingly turning and saying, oh, by the way, we need to be able to add more suppliers, make it faster and easier to check suppliers and get them through the process. Where it used to take a couple of months to get. Now I need them in weeks, if that. I need to be able to be a lot more responsive and dynamic and faster. Back to that speed of 1,000 gazelles. Now people are saying, I need to be able to do that. For example, you talked about semiconductor. I noticed that some of the semiconductor companies this week, they were mentioning no names, but there were announcements on their website saying, "Oh, neon gas. A lot of the world's neon gas comes from Russia."
Right.
Didn't know that. Hey, it's okay. We've got alternative sources. We've organized for, and we're not going to. There's not going to be a big disruption to the semiconductor space. So we're seeing folks asking for that because they need that that capability, that flexibility. The other one you talked about, training and tech. What I see going on there is. Hackett have spoken about this. We've all heard about the Great Resignation. Institute of Financial Management has said, look, folks in payables, they don't just want to go and do the job anymore. Folks want to do work that they feel is truly valuable. Typically, most people are looking to work for more, not less. Well, and therefore, well, how do you keep folks? How do you keep them engaged? How do you make sure that they're doing more valuable work so therefore you can justify, increasing the price tag? And in many cases, what we're seeing is folks saying, okay, I want to take my folks in finance, be it credit, procurement, payables, receivables, and I want to make it easy for them so they don't have to manage multiple tools. And if I can give them one tool across all those areas, that's easy, great. But I want to move them into more of a companies are redefining the roles. How do I make them more business analysts as opposed to clerical type roles? And that, I think, is what folks are looking at with technology, to sort of help people transition, give them insights, visibility across. For example, who do I owe money, and how much have I got to pay? And can I accelerate? Can I get cash flow by accelerating my collection process, or can I do it by early payment discount, supply chain financing? So we see that whole dynamic going on, and in the middle, ultimately, I think people are like, well, okay, I need to do those things. I need smart people because I need to improve or have more working capital.
Right.
So
right.
What a challenging time.
Incredibly challenging time, and Palladium, I think, another resource involved and impacted by what's going on, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Okay, Greg, you heard a lot coming from Dan there. You comment, if you would, on that, and then Vikas, I'll come back to you on an earlier observation you had. But Greg, what did you hear there?
Well, I'm going to latch on to technology, as I usually do, and talk about how technology allows technology to do technology things and humans to do human things. And that's exactly what Dan is talking about. The more satisfying, the more meaningful, and the more impactful job that humans can do is what technology cannot do, or at least cannot do today, right? Technology should be doing technology things whenever the possibility exists. And that allows people to do what they are exceptional at, and that is exceptionally difficult for technology, which is to act rapidly with high stakes decisions with little, no, or inaccurate data. And that enables people to do something that's both much more satisfying to them and much more valuable to the enterprise. So I think dead on with, technology enabling people to do better work for the company, and technology to do things that are not satisfying, or maybe not even the wheelhouse of human beings.
I love that, Greg. Really quick comment from Jerry says, via LinkedIn, you need contingency plans for your raw materials and sub-assembly suppliers, as well as all the other links in supply chain, transporters, ports, you name it.
I don't know who that dude works for, but I bet he's about to get a ton of job offers.
Right.
Just the awareness of that is really, really important.
Right.
The old in supply chain, you must assume that everyone will fail you, right? If you want to eliminate fragility, you have to find every potential point of failure and offset it.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday on LinkedIn. Greg White, he brings that POV. Check him out, follow, connect with him. But Jerry does make a good point, and the point that we're all kind of making here. But I would just add that awareness of possible new suppliers, that takes a lot of work, especially depending on how complex of an item it is. And those early stage relationships and discussions to vet them. I mean, this is a lot of homework that goes into this. So great point, Jerry. Okay. So Vikas, you made an interesting observation a second ago, sent me a note about what you're seeing suppliers willing to do. So expound on that, if you would.
Yeah, suppliers care more about payment certainty in today's time. Giving suppliers payment certainty and ultimate control around timing of the payment, when they want to get paid, how they want to get paid, and where they want to get paid is the ultimate nirvana. And buyers need to understand that they can hold off on price increases from their suppliers if they're able to give that kind of certainty and control back to the suppliers. And there's a massive opportunity around that.
Agree. Okay. So another t-shirt-ism there, the ultimate nirvana. And there's a massive opportunity to go after that and make your suppliers extremely happy and wanting to supply you more and invest in a relationship. Morgan, along these lines, or anything else in terms of what you're seeing leaders and organizations do, we're going to talk in a second about some of the really cool things that Esker is doing with both of your respective organizations. But what else are you seeing leaders do out there?
Yeah. Well, actually, I just want to build on Vikas said and what we talked about earlier from the research. A lot of academic research is we go to great pains to confirm kind of the obvious things that everybody already knows, but and this might fall in that category. But in terms of the pay it back or pay it forward and pay back, we actually documented back in the 2008 recession, and we're seeing it again now, that the companies that are paying their suppliers faster and paying them fairly, in terms of, at least if you look at cost of goods sold and how those vary across companies, they're seeing lower transaction costs, overhead costs. They're seeing lower R&D costs, less inventory. And we take from that this is the benefits of suppliers who are treated well as they come back, and they help you in all these other ways that are sometimes not real visible in terms of a P&L right away, but they do show up over the long term, and they're measurable. So, it's there. The evidence is documented. There's lots of contingencies, and it depends and all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, I think we pretty much demonstrated that truism, or that T-shirt slogan, whatever you want to come up with there, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Agreed. It makes big dollars too. Greg, comment on what you heard there from Morgan. Hey, folks, this is an uplifting, inspirational supply chain message here today. Suppliers need to be taken care of by their buyers and vice versa. But Greg, what else are you hearing?
I don't know who this equivalent of Sigmund Freud in supply chain is, but remember we said the word of the year would be stability. And I think what everyone is communicating in various ways is all companies, be they suppliers or users, manufacturers, distributors, retailers, or even consumers, they're seeking stability. And everything that they do is to get stability or make up for a lack of stability, much like Freud's concept of love. So I think if we think about our trading partners in that way, and we offer them stability in terms of demand or payment or profit and gross margin and partnership, then that's the key to, if you think about it as simply as that is the key to reaching the nirvana that Vikas talks about, and the equilibrium and the level of performance that Morgan and his team are seeing in their research.
Excellent point. Okay. So Dan, I'm gonna get your quick comment in just a second. A couple of quick comments here. Memory discussions, very timely. Agreed. Very timely and very practical. Been there, done that. Expertise here amongst our panel. Josh says, well said, Vikas. Being able to commit makes it able for the suppliers to place your company as a priority. It saves production and processing on my side on a weekly basis. Excellent point there. Hey, really quick.
Which gives Josh more time to mow his yard in the rain in Seattle. So, let's think about the impact on people's lives, right?
Absolutely. Really quick. We touched a couple times. I want to make sure I get this in. Ukraine and Russia, of course. So I can speak for this whole panel here. Thoughts and prayers are with the brave folks in Ukraine fighting aggression. But we've got Koray Koze joining Enrique Alvarez and I on Friday at 12 noon to talk about some of the global supply chain ramifications from what's taking place there in Ukraine. So join us for that, 12 noon Eastern time. A couple quick comments here before I come to Dan. Cindy says stability allows companies to focus on growth. Excellent point. Stephanie, this is fantastic stuff, she says this morning. Gotta love supply chain. You're right. We all do here for sure. Hope it's recorded to share. Yes. The replay of this discussion will be dropped on the Supply Chain Now RSS feed next week, and the video replay will be available on social and YouTube. Jerry says customers may be willing to pay more for stability if you can give it to them. He agrees with Greg. Okay, so Dan, heard a lot. We're throwing more footballs and soccer balls at you. Give us one quick thought here before we move on to the relationship that exists here.
I'm probably going to do better with that soccer ball, I think. Yeah, so I'll take the soccer ball.
I was going to ask if you can juggle with your feet.
Almost a little bit better. Yeah, I think one of the concepts that our chairman talks about is the idea of positive sum growth instead of zero sum gain. And what does that mean in plain English? I think what we're talking about is, I think what everybody is talking about is, for a long time, there's been a trend to how do you make it easy to do business for your customer, Make it easy for them to pay you. Make it, make it easy and fast and rewarding. Hey, well, I'll do business with those guys again, or they fix my problems quickly. The same applies on the supply side. So take care of your suppliers. You effectively cannot grow and compete if your suppliers don't come along with you. And I think that's certainly something that Morgan is identifying, and that's one of the reasons so one of the things that Morgan's organization does is produce good talent. We talked about one of those folks works in my organization. He's one of our sales reps, and Nick had told me, hey, Morgan and his organization, that they do great supply chain research. And so what we're interested in is, let's look at when companies have put in technology, be it on the order to cash side or procure to pay side, what is that doing? There's obviously these challenges and these pressures out there right now, but can we see a difference in the P&L or the liquidity or the supply chain metrics based on, hey, these folks have put in both technology or these practices? Clearly, folks tell us that there's been improvements to working capital, but there's also, to your point, Greg, when we see folks put in technology, one of the things that I find interesting is when you say, how's this really affected the suppliers or your people? Believe it or not, some of the things and some of the reasons projects are viewed well, I don't know if I can say they go ahead specifically just for this, is some people are saying, my staff get more time at home. They are not burnt out. I've had folks say they actually get to sleep more. That's coming up on nearly all projects if you really dive into why are they doing these things. And it is about both taking care of your staff and your suppliers, I think.
Absolutely, especially in these challenging times where they're, the burden associated with the private lives or the family time can be a lot higher based on what we've all been experiencing in recent years. All right, so we're kind of coming down the home stretch. I really wish we had a couple more hours with the intellect and expertise we've got here. But I want to touch on the cool things, Dan, that you're doing with LSQ and with TCU. But really quick, Jonathan talks about how the total cost of ownership decreases as effective supplier-buyer relationship, effective continued collaboration increases. That's an outstanding observation, and that can certainly happen. Let's see. Memory talks about, would price increases hold in this period we are in? With all the shortages of critical supplies, those who pay their suppliers consistently secure their supplies, which is kind of what Vikas was talking about a second ago. Okay, so Greg, your quick comment before we get Dan to share some of the cool things they're up to with the group here. Your quick comment there.
Yeah, I think as far as holding prices, that's difficult to even ask for. I mean, I think once you've secured it with a PO, I think a lot of companies are honoring that PO. That is a contract, right? But to be able to book prices ahead right now, there's so much invisible inflation and so much inflation yet to come, just my opinion. And also, let me qualify, not an economist. But there is so much inflation buried in companies that have tried to hold the line for their customers that dam could break at any moment in any product or any kind of area of the marketplace. We've seen it over and over again, and we'll continue to see it at least throughout this year in various areas. So, I think the relationship it's interesting, the relationship. There was a question earlier, what are people doing to forecast the need for quick shifts in their supply chain or something like that? And I think you have to provision for that, right? Again, assume everyone will fail you, or that disruption will come. And the nature of the disruption is not as important as the outcome of the disruption. Anticipate what could happen, what disruptions could come in the supply chain. Can you predict the containers would be a shortage, or can you predict that a ship is going to get stuck in the Suez Canal, which seems like 1,000 years ago now, doesn't it? But things like that. Think about the impact that those things would have, not those specific instances, and provision for that. And I think that's where companies need to be focusing their efforts as well.
Excellent point. Bill is a big fan. LSQ rocks, he says. Vikas, how about that? Bill, love you, and great to see you here. Appreciate what you do with those veterans. We got to reconnect soon. T Squared says the nourishment hit the spot. No payback should be the mantra for buyers and suppliers. And then Josh says, hey, more time to research markets and to watch the Spurs miss out on Champions League next year. I think it's a dig at. So
he's an Arsenal fan, isn't he? Dan, that guy, he's a gunner, so he's always at me about.
I've got to give you a story. 5 years ago, I sat in the away end. My friend is a season ticket holder at Spurs. I flew in from England. I sit in the stand. No colours. I'm a Norwich fan. We're playing against those guys, and it's David versus Goliath, and we win. Okay, and I'm sitting there.
I remember.
I'm sitting there saying nothing, just looking out the corner of my eye, my friend, and and all the folks around me are like, these damn farmers, we're from the equivalent of Wisconsin, and I'm sitting there and pretending to be upset, and inside I'm like, this is awesome.
and in that stadium, you had better remain silent because it's a long walk home from there.
I was silent until I got in the car. Yeah.
So we're gonna have to have you back on Supply Chain Nerds Talk Sports, Dan. We'll talk more about your football exploits. But Dan, not only beyond the great conversation and the very practical conversation we've had here today, there's some bigger picture relationship / partnership that Esker's got cooking up with both LSQ and with TCU. Let's talk about what you've got going on with LSQ first.
Sure. I think what clearly LSQ leaders in finance and factoring and supply chain finance. What we saw is that not only did companies want to bring in technology and give finance leaders visibility of who they need to pay, where they're spending their money, so they can avoid. I mean, I'll give you an example. Here in Denver, a friend of mine works for a oil company. They had lots of non-peer invoices that came in. The CFO got hit with a nasty surprise, and that impacted their performance significantly. And my friend was in a bit of trouble. Had to put in technology and measures to try and prevent that. So I think we're seeing finance leaders want visibility. I know everyone's wondering about this in your audience, so I've got to explain it. If you can get that invoice in, coded, approved, and moved around the organization and really quickly, hence the term at the speed of 1,000 gazelles, well, then they're even more likely to take an early payment discount, or in this day and age, now you're perhaps in a better position to pay and take care of your supplier and maintain your place. So the partnership with LSQ is about Esker providing technology, but LSQ helping sort of enable the funding, make it possible for you to sort of unlock more working capital and take care of your suppliers, okay, which in turn allows you to grow and for you to be more efficient. So we're finding that a lot of people are the concept of turning payables into a profit center is important.
Right.
I think what I've heard today and what the trend has been, it isn't just about making a profit on the back of your suppliers. It's about taking care of them, pay them early, pay them on time, pay them in a predictable manner.
Yes, agreed.
Agreed.
So many stories, so little time to add to Dan's point. But really quick, Mutual Omaha, Animal Kingdom. That's why Speed of 1,000 Gazelles resonates and paints such a great visual. That's what I watched all the time as a kid. So we'll keep it coming, Dan. Because expand or add a quick comment based on what Dan shared and the nature of y'all's partnership.
Yeah, I think that Dan hit it home. We are a leading working capital financing and payments platform. One of the surveys that Deloitte just came out this February was that working capital is a top and high C-suite priority across 50% of corporates that they've surveyed within the US. So just bringing home, the biggest thing in terms of not just securing supplies, but also securing your relationships. It's really important to kind of consider an early payment program that you can make available for your entire supplier ecosystem. So that really helps open up financing as an access to all your suppliers and helps them grow, helps them maintain stability. And just having that payment certainty for the suppliers is going to reap many more benefits down the road, as you think about your business.
Excellent point. And the customers, that's just another opportunity for their capital to be working for them and provide value in a different way. So excellent point, Vikas. All right. So that's not all though. Dan, who doesn't get any sleep at night or you got like 8 clones. I'm still trying to figure it out, Dan. What you've got cooking with our friends, Dr. Swink and TCU?
Well, I alluded to that a little bit earlier. I think finance leaders and those investing in technology, I think they appreciate credible voice. And here's what I mean by that. When you can bring other customers or with experience, or a research body that's trusted and well established, who can go and look into trends, be it working capital trends, liquidity trends, what's going on, are companies having to hold more stock, etc. I think people value that. So those insights, those trends, maybe even, I think Morgan was hinting a little bit earlier, hey, there's lessons that we learned before based on the Great Recession. There's lessons we've seen before about how to take care of your suppliers. So I think what the partnership with TCU enables is, yes, some insight into what's going on. Here's some trends. Here's some lessons learned from prior situations. I'm a fan of history. I don't know if I told you, my grandma was a historian, so I was should stay up until 1 or 2 in the morning. This is a true story. Reading Latin wills from the 13th and 14th century of folks who came to Norfolk, England.
Wow!
And she'd learn about their past by reading Old English. And I'm sitting there going, "Wow, I didn't read this." Anyway, it rubbed off a little bit, but I think there is some value in sort of, okay, are there historical things that companies can now do? And obviously, one of them is, if you take care of the supplier, that's going to have cost benefits.
Right.
Not just can we grow and keep the supplier base, but there'll be cost benefits. So it's those sort of things that we're excited about with Morgan. Morgan might add to that, because I'm sure there's plenty of value that TCU provide their partners.
Yes, Morgan, I would love for you to add. And it sounds like y'all might have some tips for working with the Beowulfs of industry. But Morgan, please.
Beowulfs. Oh, wow, we're getting all kinds of cultural references here. Well, we're really excited about the partnership as well. Not only are we going to embark on this kind of benchmarking technology research that Dan alluded to, that I think is going to be fantastic for helping us understand how to improve productivity in these areas, but also, to Dan's point, satisfaction, employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, supplier satisfaction, all those pieces. So that's a great project. But beyond that, Esker's joining our advisory board. We have a Center for Supply Chain Innovation that I head up, and a great board of many, about 25 different companies, all kinds of industries. And I think Esker's going to make a great addition to that board, and our board members are going to love learning more about what Esker does through that. And then the other piece is we're very interested in fintech. Fintech is all the rage right now in academia, and TCU happens to be, the Neely School happens to be one of the first schools in the country to offer a certificate in fintech studies. So this just dovetails really nicely with a lot of the other directions that we're headed as an academic institution. So it's a really great opportunity.
I love that. I love, Morgan, the work you and your staff and faculty do to engage not the next generation, the now generation. They're already making an impact, right? So I love that. We look forward to a lot more to come. And by the way, speaking of which, Greg, we should interview Morgan and a couple of his dynamic go-getter students, or whether undergrad or grads. We'll make that happen with the wonderful TCU student body. Greg, really quick, before I circle back and make sure, I think we've got a resource we want to drop in the comments for folks. But what did you hear from these partnerships here that Dan's talking about with both LSQ and TCU?
Well, first of all, let me start with the importance of this partnership is that Fort Worth is unbelievably underrated as a food and metropolitan mecca, and also there's maybe 1 or 2 great golf tournaments played there. So, and TCU is a great school, and I love purple. So, but aside from that, in all seriousness, there is a lot. There, he did it. Do that again, Morgan. There you go.
More frogs.
I think that the thing that we have to understand based on this partnership is that all of those partnerships that we've talked about, that being your customers, your consumers, your suppliers, whatever you want to call them, they are all your trading partners. And if you think about them on equal footing with you, and that they give you that stability that your company needs, then that is the perspective that not only serves your company, but causes you to serve your trading partners in a way that will accrue to benefits to you and your company in the future. the thing that companies in the supply chain have to think about now is it's not the bottom line at threat because of your supply chain. It is the top line. You cannot hide your supply chain anymore. Since the great toilet paper shortage of 2020, people know whether you have a good supply chain or you don't. And they are selecting companies based not only on their brand, based not only on their product mix, based not only on their product promises, but on their product delivery. And this is one way to help assure that you can deliver. And you only have one job in supply chain, and that is deliver.
Love that. So many references that we don't have time for here today. But Greg, I love that wrap. I love the depth of the partnerships and relationships that Dan and Morgan and Vikas are speaking to. It's so important. That's how you move mountains. All right. So really quick, folks, as we're going to spill over just a couple of minutes here, but I want to make sure if Amanda, first off, big thanks to Amanda and Catherine and Chantel and Mike and Matt, the whole team kind of behind the scenes help make conversations like this happen. If we can drop, there's a very interesting and informative ebook that the Esker team put out, Supply Chain Automation, Optimizing Cash Flow in the Age of Uncertainty. And we all know that's certainly the age we're all fighting through now. The link is in the comments to that. You can download that resource to your heart's content. Let's go around the horn and make sure folks know how to connect with each of y'all. Because as Jerry said, he had to cut out early for a conference call, but this has been a great panel. Jerry says he wants to come back and listen to the whole shebang. Hope it gets posted. Thanks much for this, Jerry. It's getting posted. We're going to drop this. It's going to be available on social as well as on the Supply Chain Now RSS feed, wherever y'all get your podcast from. Vikas, let's start with you. Really have enjoyed, and we didn't even get to all the stuff. I saw some more notes from you about things taking place in automotive, which is a fascinating industry to be watching here lately. But how can folks connect with you and the LSQ team?
LSQ.com.
That's easy.
That is the most succinct.
First of all, how'd you get that URL? That's really impressive.
That is the most succinct answer to that question in the history of Supply Chain Now. Some 860 some episodes for cost. You set records.
Yeah, it's set. It means liquidity made simple and quick.
Oh, nice.
I love it. Well, Vikas, great to have you back. We love our repeat guests. Vikas Shaw, Chief Revenue Officer with LSQ. Really appreciate that. Let's switch over to Morgan Swink with Texas Christian University. You got all the now generation thought leadership down there. You've got Morgan, his research, his expertise, and this Supply Chain Center for Excellence that we heard about. How can folks connect with you and learn more about all that good stuff?
Yeah, please. Well, I'm on LinkedIn, of course, and check out our Neely webpage. It's neely.tcu.edu. Just type in Center for Supply Chain Innovation. You'll find out all about our events and things like that.
Wonderful. Appreciate that. And great to have you back. We really enjoyed the webinar. I think Kevin joined me. Greg, you may have joined me too. Dan, of course, was there. Great to have you back here on the live stream. That was Dr. Morgan Swink, who leads basically supply chain management, those programs at Texas Christian University. So thanks for your time today, Morgan. And then Dan Reeve, who's Greg, he is rocketing up the charts. Elba Pareja Gallagher of
UPS,
of course, but I'm thinking of a nonprofit that for some reason I cannot think of. Amanda, drop that in the comments. I want to give that a little bit of love. Elba, for a long time, held the #1 rank in terms of most appearances here. But Dan, gosh, you got to be top 5 now. So how can folks connect with you? Maybe take a picture of your world championship belt that comes with that. How can folks connect with you and Esker?
Well, this is a nice to be positioned in that space. You know, I'm going back to Norwich Thursday night and we're playing Chelsea, which means we'll probably lose 10-0. So, you know, we're rooted at the bottom of the Premier League. So it's nice to be put at the top of a table for a change. danr@esker.com. So just danr@esker.com. Of course, you can get me on LinkedIn.
It is just that easy. Dan, love what you're doing. You and the Esker team are doing. I appreciate you bringing these partnerships, but also more important than that. And you know, partnerships are really important, but the perspective here, the been there, done that, actionable perspective that you helped us facilitate here today. So big thanks to Dan Reeve, head of sales at Esker.
Thanks.
Okay. You bet. And we'll see you again, Dan. All right. So big thanks to, we're going to, I'm sure our panel, Greg, have got some world changing to do, and we're a couple minutes behind. So we're going to swoosh them out, and then you and I will wrap.
Thanks
so
for staying late, gang. Appreciate it.
That's right. Big thanks again, Vikas, Morgan, and Dan. We'll see y'all shortly. All right. There we go. So Greg, man, we always have full hours, but man, there was so much more there. It could have been a War and Remembrance mini series, couldn't it?
Yeah, I think the thing that we have to think about, and we don't, is we talk a lot about soft skills, but the soft portion of a relationship, right? That which cannot always be documented, though. I think it was interesting that Dr. Swink said that they are documenting more and more the benefit of having a good relationship with your suppliers and the benefits, the specific and tangible benefits that accrue to a company that are, let's just say, good to their suppliers or their trading partners. And
right.
I think if more companies measured that would be important. I can tell you this, as a risk mitigating factor, I have always measured that. How good is our relationship? What do they owe us? What do we owe them? Do we deserve to ask for special treatment as a merchant, as a purchasing agent, in retail? We always knew the state of our relationship with companies, so that when times got tough, and they do, and they clearly do repeatedly, can we count on them, and do we frankly deserve to ask? Right.
That's right. So much here to tackle. Showme50.org is a nonprofit I was thinking of. So y'all check that out, Amanda. Maybe you can drop that in the links. But so much, a ton of perspective here today. And I love Greg, I love kind of what you're alluding to. It's not business as usual. It's your suppliers deserve better. And if you're in position to be able to take care of them better, that's a good thing to do. It certainly adds some anti-fragility to your global supply chain. So Greg, always a pleasure. Love having Dan.
Likewise.
Dan brought two of his best friends there, Morgan and Vikas. We'll look forward to getting updates from them. Morgan, if you're listening, we're going to make that student episode happen. We love figuring out what the now generation is talking about. Greg, hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Safe travels. That's right. I wasn't going to let the cat out of the bag. But if you'd like. Oh no, keep it quiet. We'll keep it quiet.
Baby's sleeping.
So folks, hopefully you enjoyed this episode as much as we have. We've had a blast. Big thanks to, of course, Dan with Esker, Morgan with TCU, and Vikas with LSQ. If you like these conversations, be sure to check out Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcasts. Jerry, it'll be published there so you can listen while you're working out or driving down the road, you name it. But whatever you do, on behalf of our entire team here, whatever you do, you got to take action, got to do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.